Hi everyone, welcome to Yoga Masters Academy. I'm Melisa Uchida.
And I'm Dagmar Bowman.
Thanks so much for being here. Today we are talking about yoga sequences and creating new sequences and
Oh my God, and feeling exhausted because you feel like I have to reinvent the wheel every week.
yes, with music too, actually.
Oh my
We
God.
could talk about that too. So in terms of yoga sequences, are you feeling pressure to switch it up every week because you're worried your students will get bored?
And never show up again, or go, or worse yet, go to somebody else's class.
Different thoughts. So I'll tell you, my background is in Ashtanga Vinyasa Yoga, which is one set sequence. I practiced the Ashtanga primary series 6 days a week for 10 years without ever taking a Vinyasa yoga class. I didn't even know, I had no urge to take a Vinyasa yoga class. It never occurred to me until I moved to Baltimore. And then I found teacher Camille, and she was teaching a class like right before I was teaching a Mysore class. So it ended up, I started doing it so I could get my practice in before teaching. And then I was like, wow, I really like this Vinyasa thing. Like, that's kind of cool. But because of that, it made it so I didn't feel any pressure to be switching up my sequence very often, because I really value the repetition. I valued my students repeating it over and over and over so that they could learn a sequence, so that they could find more silence in their practice.
So I used to have an opposite experience. I started teaching vinyasa right away. And vinyasa gives you that freedom and creativity that I was longing for, but then quickly noticed that I was burning out. So I signed myself up for a Preventing Burnout long weekend workshop in New York City, hosted by Jason Crandall, who I still to this day credit for me still teaching yoga because I was close to just giving it up. And one of the things that Jason said was, well, look at which of the yoga schools have monetarily been the most successful. And at that time, Bikram was still a thing. And Bikram blew up, and classes always full, studios raking in the dough. And for those of you who are not familiar with Bikram, it's 26 poses, the same poses held for the same period all the time. And there was a time that I was actually practicing Bikram for 7 months. At the time, I was trying to figure out whether I could ever teach my body to sweat, and the answer is yes. And one of the Bikram teachers said, Bikram never changes, but you do. So that stuck in my mind, and I want to give my students an opportunity to recognize their learning progression. So now I teach with themes that I hold for typically 4 weeks. So I have a theme and I have a pretty clear choreography, if some people want to call it that, or lesson plan, that I stick with so they can see from the beginning of the month to the end whether the pose has gotten any easier, whether there's any observable change. And Jason always said, you as the teacher will become bored of your teaching way faster than the people taking your class. Because let's say you're teaching that same class 5 or 6 times a week. They will only come once or maybe twice. So what I have noticed is when I get bored of teaching the class, I become a better teacher because what I'm going to teach next is so ingrained in my head that I can be more present with what's going on in the classroom instead of trying to memorize what pose comes next or checking my notes. And so there is a huge advantage of recycling your notes, your teaching schedule.
Yeah, I tend to have like kind of general templates.
Mhm.
So for a level 1 class, I have like sort of the same warm up and sort of the same cool down, and I change things in the middle. Level 2 would be a little different, but I tend to generally keep the same kind of template. I might change and add different peak poses depending on the level of the students. I might add a different theme or different breath work. But what that does is I would notice every time I changed a sequence, it would take me a few weeks as a teacher to feel really smooth smooth in it. So I would stumble over some words, I might get the left and right sides mixed up, and I would feel a little uneasy the first couple of weeks. And then afterwards, I really went, oh yeah, okay, now I'm comfortable, and now I can really work with students one-on-one while still teaching the class within the class. And I love to do that. So I don't change my things up very much. I just like to add, I might change a section.
Yeah.
Different sections at different times.
And here's the thing, people will come to you because they enjoy the way that you teach. And just like the benefits of the what Melisa, you just talked about in Ashtanga, you get in that flow, you come to expect a certain flow, and it's much easier for them to be in the present moment if they don't have to figure out something new every week. So the way that I teach is probably similar to how you teach. I teach in teaching blocks, and those blocks are always the same. So there's a warm-up first, then there is a lunging salutation, then there is a regular sun cell A, and then I typically take some a brief pause where I might do some standing balances before we go into sun cell B, and oftentimes sun salutations B I take into a different warrior flow. Then I have some back bends, not a whole lot of seated poses anymore. I'm kind of getting away from the seated poses because we spend so much time seated already anyway. And then some finishing poses. So within these blocks, there is creativity, of course, but they come to expect me to lead that general arc in my class. And that's also what you said. You can switch out the separate blocks to make it seem like a whole new class.
So it takes the pressure off of feeling like you need to create a new class every month or however often. What would you say to switch things up?
I go a month.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
A month, 4 weeks, a good 4 weeks to give somebody who only comes once a week a good chance to see it a few times and see their own progression a few times.
I think that's good. And even if you could even go longer, like if you look at the Les Mills programs, they have every quarter, they have a new release and the teachers memorize the new release. So that's what, every 3 months? And so that could be something if you were like, oh, you know, I'm putting so much into my sequence, or if you're a new teacher, it takes a while, it just takes a little longer to memorize it. You could do every 3 months, start there, and then start to switch it up every month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about music maybe next week. If you have any questions regarding this, or if it resonated with you, would you drop us a note? We want to be relevant for you and support you in your own teaching and encourage you and empower you to be the best version of you.
That's right. On and off the mat. If you like the video, give us a thumbs up. Please subscribe. And thanks so much. We'll see you next time. Namaste.
Take care.